What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking our Week 1 fantasy football running back rankings, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there, and let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And as you can see, we've got our Week 1 running back rankings pulled up here. We're going to go over our top 30 guys. And a quick note, this is PPR based, but other than that, that's all you need to know. So let's kick it off here with Christian McCaffrey of the Panthers. I feel like I don't really need to say all that much here. This is PPR scoring. McCaffrey, for a good reason, even despite missing the majority of the season last year, was the consensus #1 overall pick. And he's as safe as you could want in PPR scoring. He has the upside. He has the extremely high floor. And how can you rank him any lower than #1 or, at worst case, #2 when he's playing the New York Jets, for God's sakes? Now, I actually think this could be one of those sneaky high-scoring affairs where it's back and forth, which would be even better for McCaffrey because he's going to be a focal point for this offense like he normally is, but for the entirety of the game. And for that reason, I love everything about McCaffrey as a rusher, especially as a pass catcher. And if you're worried about the offensive line for the Panthers, I would say to some extent it could benefit McCaffrey as well, because if Darnold is under pressure, he has to get rid of the football pretty quickly. He's going to be looking for those quick checkdowns. McCaffrey is going to be occupying those areas pretty often. So can't really say anything bad about McCaffrey in this great matchup for Week 1. Moving on, we've got Dalvin Cook. And I will say I was a little bit tempted to put Dalvin Cook #1 overall. But look, if McCaffrey is 1, then I almost say Dalvin Cook is 1B on the week. This is an awesome matchup versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Cook can get it done in every which way, as a rusher and as a pass catcher. And the Vikings are a run-first team. The Bengals defensively leave a lot to be desired still. I actually think this can be a high-scoring game, but if there's any one of these teams that pulls away, I see it being the Vikings. And again, that potentially would benefit Dalvin Cook here. I think, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Dalvin Cook finishes as the #1 running back on the week. Afterwards, we've got Alvin Kamara, still in that awesome tier 1 level of guys. I said it before during the draft process, I wouldn't be shocked if Alvin Kamara ends up being the #1 running back in fantasy football at the end of the year, just because his involvement this year in the Saints offense is going to be unlike any other. I think the usage is going to be absolutely through the roof. And I think the Saints are going to be putting up a lot of points here versus the Green Bay Packers. Sure, they probably won't win the game, but Alvin Kamara, look, I get all the Marquez Callaway hype, but Kamara at the running back position is still the best pass catcher that the Saints have, not even close. As far as running ability, he has that as well. Jameis Winston being the quarterback is going to improve the scoring upside for everybody on this team. Kind of don't have to worry about Taysom Hill as much. So those are all benefits for Alvin Kamara. I absolutely love him this week. Moving on, we've got Joe Mixon at the #4 spot. Maybe a bit of a surprise here. But if, there's any week where Mixon could potentially show us all of that huge upside that makes him a boom or bust candidate, but hopefully more boom than bust, it would be here versus the Vikings. I said it before, I think this could be a high-scoring affair. And the Vikings defense, even though it's possible in the NFL to make those quick turnarounds, last year wasn't all that intimidating. And, if there's a team like the Vikings where that Cincinnati Bengals offensive line probably doesn't look absolutely horrid, I think, again, it could be this Week 1 matchup. So that's a positive for Joe Mixon. He's got all those factors pointing in his favor in terms of potentially setting career highs in usage, rush attempts, pass catches. So that's all really exciting. And I'm really going to be paying attention to how much he is utilized as a pass catcher now without Giovanni Bernard. I think this would be a pretty good litmus test for Joe Mixon. And even though, again, probably view him as a boom or bust guy, I do think the upside definitely outweighs the risk with him here. So I've got him as a top 5 running back on the week. Afterwards, Derrick Henry versus the Arizona Cardinals. Yes, Derrick Henry is one of the most one-dimensional running backs in the NFL, but he has awesome upside as a rusher and as a touchdown scorer. For God's sakes, over 2,000 yards last season. I think this will be, again, a high-scoring affair. Titans versus the Cardinals. And the Titans' mentality is still run the football first. They've got a great offensive line. And honestly, with the addition of Julio Jones, the maturation of A.J. Brown, and a good game-managing quarterback, and Ryan Tannehill, I think all those things will help Derrick Henry, make him even more efficient potentially, which is pretty scary. I've got him as a top 5 running back, even with this being a PPR format, which obviously, if it's standard, he would be even higher. Moving on, we've got Aaron Jones of the Green Bay Packers. I think Aaron Jones, similar to what I said about Alvin Kamara, is going to benefit from a high-scoring affair here. And even with the return of Randall Cobb to the Green Bay Packers, make no mistake about it, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, the top 2 weapons for Aaron Rodgers. And for that reason, I think that Jones is going to be heavily involved. I do think the departure of Jamal Williams, his replacement being A.J. Dillon, I don't quite think A.J. Dillon is going to take away as many opportunities from Jones as maybe Jamal Williams did, especially as a pass catcher. So I like the upside here. I think it's going to be a lot of points being put up, which is obviously going to benefit all the Green Bay weapons involved. Moving on, I've got Austin Ekeler at the number 7 spot. And I'll be honest with you, as much as I love Austin Ekeler, a top 3 running back, in my opinion, especially in PPR scoring, this is an awful matchup for him. It's a very tough one, but I do think that the floor is still relatively safe and high enough for me to have him as a top 10 guy. But, if you guys are looking for upside at the running back position, having him lower does make sense, potentially outside of the top 10 running backs. This Washington defense is a very, very tough unit, maybe one of the best defenses, if not best defenses in the NFL. But on the flip side, look, Ekeler is still going to be massively involved in this offense, I think more so than he has ever been. He's the 1B to the 1A in terms of pass catching options for the LA Chargers with Keenan Allen and himself. The young, promising quarterback in Justin Herbert. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Ekeler comes away from this matchup with between 8 and 10 receptions, which obviously is going to be a huge bump in PPR scoring. Afterwards, we've got James Robinson of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this might be the most intriguing matchup for me the entire week, because I am dying to see how the Jaguars utilize James Robinson, because the Houston Texans, make no mistake about it, they're one of the worst teams, probably the worst team from top to bottom of the NFL. They're an absolute joke. Defensively, they don't scare anyone. Without Deshaun Watson, they don't scare anyone offensively either. But I do think there could be some points had here, and James Robinson should be a beneficiary. The only person that could stop him here would be, I think, Urban Meyer, if he gets cute with his usage. But, these were the type of games last year that made James Robinson a weekly top 5 running back. That's why I'm so excited about the upside in week 1. And it probably won't be the last time where you see a running back that's playing the Houston Texans be ranked in the top 10. Afterwards, we've got Nick Chubb here for the Cleveland Browns. And yes, another more so one-dimensional running back, but I think this will be one of the higher scoring games on the week, the Browns versus the Chiefs, back and forth type of situation. And the Browns are one of the most run-heavy teams in the NFL, even with Kareem Hunt on this team. I think Nick Chubb in this type of game script versus a team like the Kansas City Chiefs that are able to score with absolute ease, this is a great scenario for the Browns and honestly all their offensive weapons. I think this could be one of their higher ceilings on the year, from everybody to Chubb to Hunt to all those wide receivers, Baker Mayfield included as well. For that reason, I do have Chubb as a top 10 guy. Moving on, we've got Jonathan Taylor for the Colts going up against the Seattle Seahawks. I kind of see him in that similar ilk as a Nick Chubb, even though I could see this being one of the lower scoring games of the week. But the Colts, they want to be a run-first team. They've still got a good offensive line. And if you believe, which was said from camp in terms of Taylor getting more usage than he did his rookie season, that's obviously a good thing. I still think he's more one-dimensional, compared to some of these other guys on this list, because Nyheim Hines is still there and he's that pass-catching guy. But other than that, it's not like I'm worried about Marlon Mack. I think Jonathan Taylor has high scoring upside, high rushing upside, similar to, again, like a Derrick Henry, a Nick Chubb. The matchup could be better, but I still have Jonathan Taylor as a top 10 guy. Afterwards, I'm going with Najee Harris here And even though I don't like the Pittsburgh offensive line, I've been saying that pretty much all year long. This is a matchup where I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are just going to have to put their best foot forward, pedal to the metal, because they're going up against the Buffalo Bills. And as great of a defense as the Steelers have, the Bills offensively, they just put you outside of your comfort zone. And I think a lot of points could actually be scored in this game. And for that reason, Najee Harris might be relied on more than we might anticipate as a pass catcher. That's what I'm kind of hoping for here, and kind of elevate that upside and that floor as well. But he's still going to be that red zone running back for them. I'm going to be really intrigued in terms of how that offensive line for the Steelers holds up here. That's going to be something to watch for. But I do think he's one of those guys that's a low-end RB1. Afterwards, I've got Antonio Gibson going up versus the Chargers. A tough matchup. I would have Antonio Gibson higher if I knew for a fact how he was going to be utilized as a pass catcher, because what we saw in the preseason, is J.D. McKissic going to be phased out, or is he still going to be a guy that's heavily relied on? You've still got Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, Adam Humphries was added. We'll see if Curtis Samuel plays or not, but there's other options as well. And I do think this will be a lower scoring game. And unlike in Austin Ekeler, if you can't guarantee me the pass catching opportunity with Antonio Gibson, I'm going to have to rank him outside of the top 10. Afterwards, I've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, this one is maybe going to have an asterisk next to it because Edwards-Helaire is questionable, but, the Chiefs have said he is going to play. If he does, I said it with Nick Chubb, I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to get a lot of usage. The main worry is going to be, if he's in a potential snap count. If you guys are worried about that, I understand having him lower. But for me, if he plays, I view him as a top 15 running back. To me, this is going to be a high-scoring affair. Helaire is the pass-catching running back for the Chiefs as well. He's going to get the volume as a rusher on top of that. Maybe not as much as he will in a couple of weeks where he's, a little bit more healthy. But the fact of the matter is this is going to be one of the higher scoring games of the week, so I think that'll balance itself out. And I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be a borderline RB1. Next up, Raheem Mostert. This might be a bit of a surprise considering some of the names he's ahead of, but this is an awesome matchup for the 49ers, for Raheem Mostert. So much so that Trey Sermon is somebody that you could possibly play and get success out of, because the Detroit Lions defensively, they are not a group to be scared of. And I could see the 49ers just pulling away from the Detroit Lions, which is going to be an even better thing for all the 49er running backs. Mostert has been uber efficient. He is the number one running back for the 49ers. Fingers crossed, no injuries, nothing like that. But, last year when he was healthy, he was the guy for the 49ers. And I think, obviously, with San Francisco being a run-first team, that benefits him even more. This is an awesome matchup and a great example where a guy that you drafted in the later rounds, just based purely on matchups and game plan and game flow, could end up being a borderline RB1 type of guy. Afterwards, Ezekiel Elliott. I've got him 15th overall, and honestly, I kind of wanted to have him maybe even lower because for me here, there's a lot of things that worry me here. First and foremost, the Bucs, the best rushing defense last year. They pretty much return everybody. And I think that Zeke is going to have a long day. Now, on top of that, the offensive line for the Dallas Cowboys going through some COVID issues, so they take a further hit there as well. Also, I think the Bucs are going to be scoring a lot of points in this game, and I could see it where they kind of just pull away from the Dallas Cowboys, and then Dallas has to kind of abandon the run. And to me, that would be the worst case scenario for that reason. Yes, I realize Zeke was a top 5 drafted running back and a huge name, but this is just not the matchup or the combination that you want from Zeke. So I would be fading him, and honestly, I don't see an RB1 performance from him here. Next up, Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks. Another kind of tough matchup here. The Colts are a good team defensively. I think this will be probably a lower scoring game, but Chris Carson is just so involved offensively, whether the Seahawks have it going or not. He's an underrated pass catcher, And I think he's going to be a high end to mid level RB2 on the week. Not as big of a name like, as an Ezekiel Elliott, but I wouldn't be shocked if he outscores Zeke this week. Afterwards, Saquon Barkley, 17th overall. Maybe a bit of a shock, but look, just having a big name alone won't get you a top 10 type of placement here because Barkley is going up versus a very good, stingy defense. The Giants have said that he could very well be on a snap count, which is an awful thing. I mean, probably won't be the case 2-3 weeks from now, but that's not when you hear it as a fantasy football manager. And he's still coming back from a very serious injury on a bad offensive line, average to below average, I'll say it like that, and an offense with a lot more pass catching options. So I think that further hurts Barkley. For that reason, I'm not all that confident in him here. Basically, I think you're going to be hoping and praying for some touchdowns for Barkley, and if he doesn't get them, he could be one of those disappointments on the week. Afterwards, I've got Mike Davis here for the Atlanta Falcons. I think the Falcons and the Eagles could be in a high-scoring affair here, and Davis, what I'm looking forward from him is his pass-catching ability. I don't necessarily think he's going to have all that much success purely on the ground, but the Falcons, a pass-heavy team, and I think Mike Davis is going to be heavily utilized. If this wasn't a PPR type of ranking, I would definitely have him lower on the list. But all things considered, I think the Falcons are going to produce several pretty high-scoring weapons on the week. And Mike Davis, you could do a lot worse than him at the running back position. Afterwards, Gus Edwards at the number 19 slot. Even though the Baltimore Ravens have added running back options, namely the big guy, Le'Veon Bell, even though I don't think Le'Veon Bell really has all that much left, Gus Edwards is still the guy to be targeting as the Baltimore running back. This is an awesome matchup versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And even though Lamar Jackson is the primary rusher for Baltimore, I think Gus Edwards is a guy that's going to be in that kind of, Nick Chubb-ish conversation for the entire season. Doesn't get you a lot through the air, but on the ground, he's going to be utilized. Like he was paid before J.K. Dobbins got hurt. He's the clear number 2 guy on this team, and I do think he has over 100-yard upside here, and you throw in maybe a touchdown or two, and that's what you're hoping for with Gus Edwards. Definitely possible versus the Raiders, but again, doesn't have too much PPR upside on his own. Afterwards, we get to Miles Sanders for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'd have him ranked a little bit higher, but I'm worried about Jalen Hurts taking away some opportunities from him. This Atlanta Falcons defense, I'm not all that scared by it. So I think Miles Sanders, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of his during the draft process, does actually have a decent matchup here. I'm going to be really, really curious to see how the Eagles utilize him, like Boston Scott, Gainwell as well. But I do think Sanders should be the alpha on that team. We'll see if that's the case or they go a running back by committee type of approach. But again, the thing that prevents me having Sanders any higher is Jalen Hurts and the fact that I think he's going to have a really big game. Afterwards, 21st overall, Kareem Hunt of the Browns. I said it with Nick Chubb. I expect a huge scoring output here from both of these teams, and I think that the Browns are going to be utilizing pretty much all of their big name guys. Kareem Hunt to begin with is the pass catching running back, but at the same time, he gets 10 rush attempts, if not more, every single game. And he's pretty efficient with them as well. Sometimes gets red zone usage on top of that. I think in PPR, he's going to be a decent low end RB2. Again, if the Browns weren't facing a team like the Chiefs where it was probably going to be a back and forth offensive battle, then it'd be different. But I think this is a great situation for Kareem Hunt to be relevant alongside Nick Chubb. 22nd overall, we've got DeAndre Swift. We've gotten the news that he will play week 1, but it's still a very tough matchup versus a good San Francisco defense. And, we just learned that DeAndre Swift is going to be playing, so he could be on a snap count. Wouldn't shock me one bit with that groin, how much time he missed. And, maybe the Detroit Lions seeing a lot they like from one Jamal Williams. But Swift is still the number 1 guy. The fact that he's playing, means that he's going to get the opportunities. I just don't love the upside here. Thankfully, Swift is a good PPR option. What worries me, however, is, him potentially being kind of saved in terms of health. And if the Detroit Lions go down quickly, maybe, the coaching staff decides, we don't want to put too much on DeAndre Swift. So more so here, worried about the game flow, even though I really do like the talent with Swift. Afterwards, David Montgomery. Yeah, a lot of people were bullish on David Montgomery during the draft process. The guy was like a top 5 running back last year. This is an absolutely god-awful matchup versus the LA Rams. Montgomery is a guy that's playing on an average offensive line, and I think even that might be a little bit, optimistic saying it. I'm scared by the fact that Matt Nagy got play calling duties back, that he added Damian Williams, somebody that he's comfortable with. I don't think Montgomery is going to see the same upside as a pass catcher. And the Rams are one of the best defenses in the NFL. I don't have to remind you the night and day performances we got from Montgomery last season when he went up versus cake defensive matchup versus actual good defenses. That's why I've got Montgomery so low and somebody just that I'm going to be fading. After this, Ronald Jones, 24th overall. Honestly, I kind of want to have Jones a little bit higher if I knew for a fact that, the Bucks were just going to say, yeah, he is our number one guy, which I still think he is, but more so how much they want to mix in Leonard Fournette and Giovanni Bernard. I would have him higher, but I think the matchup is a great one. And I think Ronald Jones is going to be like in a similar type of situation maybe as a Gus Edwards. But again, until I see the usage, I'm just going to prevent myself from having him too much higher. But I will say in terms of running backs that we get to around this category, around this range that have tremendous chance to outproduce their current rankings, Ronald Jones would probably be at the top of that list. Next up, Myles Gaskin, 25th overall. And this is the point where we get to some pretty tough matchups, things like that. And that's what I see here with Myles Gaskin going up versus the New England Patriots. I think this will probably be one of the lower scoring games on the week. And if Myles Gaskin doesn't get in the end zone, that's what I'm worried about. The positive at this point in time is that he is the number one guy for the Miami Dolphins. But other than that, I think it's going to be tough here. If it was a better matchup, I'd have Myles Gaskin a lot higher, but I think this is going to be a low, ugly scoring game. These are two divisional opponents that know each other well, and I think Myles Gaskin could end up being a liability. Next up, Damian Harris. Pretty similar situation, honestly, to Myles Gaskin, but just a little bit worse because Damian Harris, not that big of a pass catcher really at all. Obviously, the fact that Cam Newton is longer there is going to benefit him, but we'll see how much Ramondre Stevenson is used and if he takes away opportunities from Damian Harris. But again, the fact that I think this will be a lower scoring game, can't get all that excited about Damian Harris. Afterwards, I've got Darrell Henderson, just another really tough matchup. Henderson also dealing with that thumb, even though the Rams have said that he will be playing in week 1, but the Chicago Bears defense, it's a tough matchup. I wouldn't be shocked if, again, it's a lower scoring affair, even though I will say if there's one team that blows out the other, it will be the Rams beating the brakes off the Chicago Bears. Not all that worried about Sony Michel, but at the same time, it's going to be something that I'm paying attention to. And I think Darrell Henderson, unfortunately, is going to be pretty touchdown dependent this week, which makes him probably a low end RB2 where you're going to be relying on some pass catching for him to return value. Next up, 28th overall, Chase Edmonds. Here, what I'm hoping for is a lot of pass catching opportunities from Edmonds. I don't see the rushing upside. Yes, this is going to be a high scoring affair, so maybe a little bit better than it normally would in terms of Edmonds' volume, but he's going to get opportunities taken away from Kyler Murray, who's going to probably be top 3, top 4 in terms of rushing yards for the quarterback at the end of the year. I think James Conner is honestly the better overall running back, and I think the Cardinals are going to be passing the football a lot here, but hopefully that benefits Edmonds, and in a PPR scoring format, he's a decent start. Afterwards, 29th overall, David Johnson of the Houston Texans. This is probably more so of a dart throw, but I'm curious to see what happens here. I think for Houston, they still view David Johnson as their primary running back. He's the best pass catcher out of this group, which could prove pretty important, especially in games where they go down fast. And I think that's what we're going to see for the majority of the season. Even though he's not a sexy name, even though he's nowhere close to what he was a couple years ago with the Cardinals, I think David Johnson could surprise some people here and like get you like, between 10 and 15 points, something like that. And then lastly, I've got Josh Jacobs at the 30 spot. Josh Jacobs is somebody that I'm fading this week and probably all year long. I don't like the offensive line situation for the Raiders. I think this is a tough matchup. I could see the scenario where, the Raiders fall behind and then just have to rely on their pass catchers, which Josh Jacobs is not. The addition of Kenyon Drake, I think Josh Jacobs becomes too touchdown dependent. So I'm just basically fading him. I think he's like high-end RB3, something like that, where if you don't get a touchdown, it's going to be a disappointing game. And I could see him getting like single-digit type of production. But with that, we wrap up our week 1 running back rankings. And as always, let us hear in the comment section, did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin. But with that being said, we'll see you guys in future videos.